Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
In high school, when I was younger, something pretending to be my mom came into my room late at night, and it wasn't her. So my family actually lived in a haunted house. It was crazy because we built the house and there was nothing on the land before. But literally on the very first day that we moved in, my mom and dad and I brought boxes to the house and left my sister there while we went back to our old house to pick up more boxes. And by the time we came back with the new boxes, my sister was trying to take the screen off of our window and climb out of the house because she said she heard men in the kitchen talking, so she had locked her bedroom door. And yeah, she was the only one in the house at the time. So let's fast forward a little bit. It's October of 2013. Stuff had been happening in the house. My sister and I kept telling my parents that there's things that are going on, but they weren't really believing us. It was kind of like a horror movie. So it's October 2013. I'm sitting in my bedroom. Here's my room. My sister's room is right here. A long hallway right here, then an open floor plan with a kitchen, living room, and then my parents' bedroom on the other side of the kitchen. So I heard somebody moving around dishes and stuff in the actual kitchen area. So I thought it was my mom. I said, "Hey, mom, are you out there?" And I heard my mom say, "Yeah," like exactly like that. And I'm like, "Could you bring me a glass of water?" Because I was already in bed. I don't know why I asked that, but I heard my mom respond back and say, "Yeah, I'm coming," like something like that. So I'm thinking I'm getting some water. My mom's gonna come, bring it to me. And I heard that it's so crazy. I hear her walking down the hallway all the way up to my bedroom door. And right when the footsteps get to my bedroom door, silence. Keep in mind, it's pitch black. I'm just in my bed and I hear my mom, or what I think is my mom, get down on the floor on all fours. I had carpet in my bedroom, and it was like she scurried around my bed, like like going around my bed. And I literally was like, "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" And I like got up and I took my phone out and turned my flashlight on. Moment I turned the flashlight on, noises stopped completely, and I'm like, "There's no." Oh my god, I get chills. There's nobody in here. There was literally nobody in the room. And shortly after that, my sister came out of her bedroom and was like asking what the hell happened. Like, she had heard my mom's voice as well, and she heard me like screaming. And that's when we both went and got my parents. And yeah, the story of that is actually insane. We ended up having psychics come to try and cleanse the house. It didn't work. There was a time when my dad thought someone broke into the house, so he got a weapon and was walking around the house trying to make sure no one was in there. No one was in there. Tons of different stuff. We also discovered there might be pioneer settlers buried under the grounds of the house. I went down to the courthouse in South Dakota to look all of it up. And yeah, I could go on for days and days with ghost stories, but that was definitely the creepiest. Hearing my mom's voice and it walking up to my door and then crawling around on all fours. That's some shit that I don't know if people really believe still. I don't know if you're believing this, but that 100% happened to me. And that was one of the reasons why I got into the career of wanting to paranormal investigate. Because once you have an experience like that, you're kind of in the world and you can't get out of it. At least I couldn't.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I made this recording 10 minutes. I don't know if it's going to take that long, but this story is a rabbit hole and it made me believe in the paranormal forever. My boyfriend and I had a spiritual attachment for 9 months. Started about a year ago when we went to see his family in South Carolina and go to a cemetery. We went with the siblings to play Find My Grave with a spirit box. Find My Grave is basically like you ask the spirit box questions and see if the spirit like guides you to their grave, basically gives you clues and whatever. So we start doing this, and all of a sudden we hear these music notes coming out of a spirit box that were going da 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 da, and that was kind of the spirit's answer as yes, so like we would say, is your grave over here? It would go da-da. Were you a man? Da-da. And then we were like, wait, were you a music teacher? And it goes da-da. So that was pretty crazy. We walked all around the cemetery trying to find this spirit, very active with us. And then all of a sudden everything went silent for like 25 minutes. So then we were kind of like, okay, whatever, maybe this is BS. So we started to nickname this guy Music Man throughout this whole thing. So we, at the end, decided to leave. And we were like, okay, bye, Music Man. And after 25 minutes of silence, it goes, Dana. And we were like, holy crap. Is this recording? Okay. So a few days go by. We go home. I used to work in an art gallery, which I believe was haunted. So I turn on the spirit box. I was alone in the art gallery and I was like, is there anybody here? Whatever. And the first thing that happens is Donna. So I felt a little unsettled, but I was like, okay, maybe there's something wrong with the spirit box. Like this has just all been BS. Like it's just like a malfunction in the spirit box or whatever. Until I go in another ghost investigation with a psychic that I trust and I go with my boyfriend. Turn on the spirit box. Starts going, Donna. The psychic goes, I'm seeing 6 people in a cemetery going with a spirit box. I'm seeing like a really old cemetery. I'm seeing a lonely man. I'm seeing a lost grave. You have something with you. And we were like, whoa, how did you know how many people were with us? You're seeing a lost grave? And she's like, yes, you have someone with you. He really likes your energy. He died alone, yada, yada, yada. And we're like, oh God. And so during this time, the spirit box is going, Donna, 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 Donna. Okay. Fast forward to our next ghost investigation. We are in Griffith Park and I have this on camera. I will post it again so you can see. So we're doing a ghost investigation. We hear the Donna, Donna, Donna over and over again. And then finally, the spirit box says, and I have this on camera, Music Man. He started to identify what we were calling him, his nickname. And I start crying. I get really emotional. And I'm like, you know your name is Music Man. How? And then he finally speaks for the first time. And he has this accent. And he goes, I'm proud of it. Over and over again. I'm proud of it. And he goes, family and all this kind of stuff. And it made us really emotional. Yeah. Okay. So here's the next thing. We do another ghost investigation. Okay. The Donna thing is happening. He also likes doing opera. He'll go, ah, ah. So he's like adding other music, but you know it's him. At this point, like, you know it's him. Okay. I don't even really know how to describe it. But anyways, he starts to send us a message. During this ghost investigation, and I have this all on camera, he says the number 34 at least 25 to 30 times. He keeps going 34, 34, 34, 34. And we're like, what are you trying to tell us? And he doesn't tell us what he's trying to say. Okay. So then the next day, I'm going on an Instagram live. I also have this on camera. And I turn on the spirit box and I'm telling my audience what was going on with the 34 thing. And all of a sudden, in front of everyone on the live, he starts saying 34, 34, 34. So many people saw this happening. And we're like, what does this number mean? What is going on? I looked at plot lines at the cemetery we were at. I looked at codes. I looked at angel numbers. And I looked at everything. And I still haven't found the real answer to what 34 was. Okay. But this gets even better. So just keep watching. At this point, I'm just using Music Man in my ghost investigations. I'm like, hey, can you see if there's another spirit? Like, can you bring them out and whatever? And can you protect us? Whatever. Okay. This is when it gets crazy. My boyfriend's looking for something for me for Christmas. And I love the Misfits. They're like one of my favorite bands. And he is at a vintage store. And in the back of a rack is this shirt. No context. Misfits font. And it says Music Man. And he got it for me for Christmas. But it was weird. Why was that sitting in the back? This lady said at the store that it's been there for a while. No one knows where it came from or what it is. I know there's like the musical Music Man, but it didn't look like one of those theater musical shirts, right? Okay, I have it. I'll show it to you guys. Okay, this is the shirt, Music Man. There's nothing, no more information about it anywhere on the shirt. It just says Music Man, okay? I go ghost investigating a store. I hear the Donna, and I'm like, hey, Music Man, like, whatever. And he goes, present, in his voice, in his, like, howdy voice. I'm going, like, what? Like, what are you trying to say? And he goes, Christmas present. He literally said Christmas present. He is such an intelligent spirit. And I know you guys are going to start saying, like, oh, he's negative, whatever, blah, blah. No, he never was. Like, he felt in a weird way like family, and I'm not trying to like sound crazy. I got info about him from multiple psychics, and they're like, no, he died alone. And like everyone I've told this story to feels like he was left on earth for some reason to learn a lesson, to figure out something, to be a part of something he wasn't a part of in his life. Like he wanted to experience something. And now I think we went to the Clown Motel and he was there with us. I have it all on camera too on my YouTube. And I'm like, oh, that's Music Man. And he's going, dun dun whatever. He's like very reactive. And then all of a sudden, after that investigation, he's gone. He hasn't talked to us since. And we're trying to wonder why, like what happened. And like sometimes we joke, we're like, oh, we miss him, whatever. And I mean, obviously, like, no, it's not good to like have an attachment around you all the time. But we wondered why, like, what was the moment? Like, why did he finally leave after 9 months of just trying to send us messages and being so responsive and being so aware of our lives? Like, what lesson did he learn? And that's what I'm still trying to figure out. And I don't care if you guys don't believe me or not, but this is a very real thing that happened to me, and I have footage for most of this to back it up. So if you're curious to learn more, or if you know anything about why this happened or about the number 34, like please let me know, because this is what made me believe in the paranormal. It was him saying Music Man on the spirit box, him sending us messages multiple times. The Christmas present thing at the end was just like so insane, and I'm still trying to just like figure it out, and I wish I knew the reason. But that's my story. Thank you for watching. If you watched this far, I appreciate it. And yes, this is the craziest paranormal story I have had so far.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was 8 years old, my family and I moved to a small town in the Midwest, and it was a farm town. It was built in like the early 1800s. I think it was part of like the Homestead Act or something. And it was, had a bunch of acres, a barn that had burnt down. Like it was an active farm back then. Lots of history. People definitely passed away on the property, that we knew for sure. And man, it wasn't like very obvious as a child. I was super intuitive, and I didn't know what to do with that intuition, so I naturally got a Ouija board. And of course, I dragged along my best friend and my sister and a couple other friends on this Ouija board journey, where we would go and sit at the top of the stairs to the basement, and we would turn all the lights off and turn candles on, and then ask this thing questions, and it responded. And I don't tell people this story, it sounds psycho. The fact that other people are there to verify all of these things and validate gives me inner peace, but I don't tell people. But it worked. And unlike what I thought would happen when it would move, even when we lift all of our hands off of it, it's still moving. It's how aggressively it moved. It wasn't gentle, it was like very sharp. And so much time would pass when we were in there talking to this entity as well. Like we would think 10 minutes went by and it would be 2 hours. Like insane. Being little kids, we wanted to know questions and answers like, who are we going to marry when we grow up? Or how many kids are we going to have? Or just questions like that. And every single time we start, it would give us answers at first, like, and it would tell us about itself. We would say like, what's your name? And it would just say demon, D-E-M-O-N, like over and over again. When we would ask questions about me, at first it would like give us answers, and then it would just spell bitch repeatedly, B-I-T-C-H, B-I-T-C-H, B-I-T-C-H. Horrifying. Like any question about me. Also, sorry if I seem lackluster. I already told this whole story and it deleted. It was so freaky. We're also having like visuals of like hands reaching towards the planchette, like in the candlelight flicker. This entity gave us details saying that it was like buried in the cemetery. A cemetery that was like local, like the name was legit. It gave us like, I think it either gave us a plot number or it was just like the last name. And we did go there, and what we found was crazy. Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Boy, have I been waiting for a trend like this, because everything that I'm about to tell you are true events that transpired to me and my family from October 2011 until March 2014. So this is the house in question, and I was able to find it online. We rented it through a rental company. After about a week of us moving in, cleaning up, we get a call from this lady who's actually the original owner of the house, and she asked us, hey, can I please stop by to see it one last time? So of course we didn't think anything of it. We're like, of course, stop by, come see it. So it turns out this lady was very sickly. I don't remember what illness she had, but she was leaving for treatment, and the prognosis wasn't looking good. And she was telling us different memories she had with her family in that house. And once we get into my room, it was green and it had this cute little picket fence floral. This is the only picture I have. It's not that good, but it had little bunnies and stuff. And she said, Please, if you are going to change anything in this house, do not touch this room. I hand painted this mural with my daughter who passed away. Which at the time we didn't think anything of it. I had no plans of changing it, plus it's a rental. We didn't want to change anything about it. Now, once this lady left is when things started to happen. Now, everything that I'm about to tell you, as it happened, it continued to happen until we left this house. So at this point, we're about 2 weeks into living here, and I'm coming back home from school. I run up the stairs to the right. There's this office space, and the door was slightly open and the light was on. So I just turned off the light and closed the door, and I go to my mom's room. We talk about our day, and then we're gonna walk down the hallway, and we just stop. We stare at each other because I had told her about the light. The door again was open, and the light was on. So at this point, we kind of just walk over, we step into the room. There's nothing in there. We said, oh, how weird. Turn off the light, close the door. Now, from here on out, there's little sprinklings of this light is on, this door is randomly open, after you had closed it or turned off that light. Nothing crazy. After that, about a month or two in, I had a little miniature pinscher. Her name was Susie. She would start barking all the way at the bottom level towards the garage. Now, the way the house was laid out is that there was a 2-car garage. You would go in and there was a second living room, go up some steps, kitchen, living room, dining room, and then you would go up the stairs and it was the 4 bedrooms and the bathrooms upstairs. But all of a sudden, Susie would start aggressively going downstairs and barking at the garage door. We didn't pay any mind to this because we thought, oh, maybe there's a lizard or some sort of animal or whatever in the garage. Until one day, my dad started seeing this creepy crawl space in the garage. The door would be open. Now, this happened about twice. Mind you, this is weeks, maybe months apart. So we don't really think anything of it. Maybe it's a raccoon that crawled out of it. I don't know. Until one day, Susie had been barking at this door once or twice a week. And one day she goes downstairs. Mind you, all the lights are off. She's barking so aggressively at the garage door, just going at it. And all of a sudden we hear a yelp, just ah! And she comes bolting up the stairs, goes all the way up the second set of stairs, and goes into my parents' room under the covers in her bed. At this point, we all look at each other and we're like, what the hell? We check her, she's perfectly fine. And then from here on forth, she still barks, but she would bark from the steps in the kitchen going down into that second living room. She would bark from there. She never went back to the garage door again. Then the next thing that started happening is we would hear just stomping up and down the stairs. And we would be like, what the hell is going on? And a lot of the times it was happening when everyone was in the house. So we were just excusing it as, oh, it's my dad, oh, it's my mom. Or my mom would think it's me, and vice versa. Until one day, it happened to all of us individually when we were by ourselves. So I would hear stomping going up and down the stairs, but I would be home alone. That continued on, and we said, oh, okay, well, I guess there's spirits in the house. Whatever. There's nothing you can do about it. We didn't feel any negative energy or anything, so we, again, paid it no mind. And then, I guess we must have had a little trickster spirit. All of a sudden, things would start missing and then reappearing. So let's say all of a sudden you open the drawer in the kitchen and all of the spoons are gone, and they would be missing for 2 or 3 days, and then you would open it back up and they would just magically reappear. So this happened the whole time we were there. We didn't pay any mind to it. It's innocent, whatever. After the first year is when things started getting progressively more intense, more aggressive. I would be home alone after school in my bed doing homework, either with the door closed or the door open, but I started hearing scratching on my door, just a scratching sound. And, I thought maybe it's Susie trying to get into the room. Until one day, those scratching noises were happening while I was home alone and the door was closed and Susie was sitting next to me. I would just wait at that point until my parents got home from work and then get out of my room. Never any scratch marks or claw marks or anything. Soon after that, I started experiencing a lot of seeing shadows in the hallway or feeling like something was watching me while I was taking a shower. And then I talked to my mom about it, and she said she saw the shadows too. My dad eventually started seeing them, and it was always of a man in a suit. He had a top hat and he had a suitcase, and you would only ever see his shadow in the top hallway, or you would see his shadow while you were taking a shower, and you would open the curtain and there would be nothing there. And that was the absolute worst, just feeling and knowing you were being watched. Then one day, again, I'm by myself, my parents still aren't home from work, and I'm upstairs in my room with Susie, and mind you, the garage is directly under, so whenever someone comes home, you can kind of feel a slight shake and hear the garage door open and close very clearly. So at this point, Susie hears the garage door open. She goes downstairs all excited to say hi to my parents or whoever it is coming home. I'm still doing homework, so I'm not focused too much on it. And I literally hear the garage door open. I hear my mom with ruffled bags, and she's like, "Joelle, come down here. Help me with the groceries." I'm like, "Okay." I go downstairs. My mom isn't in the kitchen. I just find Susie staring with her head little cocked over at the garage door. And at this point, I start shaking. I'm like, "Mommy?" No answer. I open the garage door. It's empty. The garage is closed. No one is home. At this point, I bolt it upstairs, lock myself in my room, and I do not come out of my room until my parents come home. After this occurs once or twice more, and then after that I completely ignore it until my mom physically comes into my room and says, "Hey, help me with the groceries," because that freaked me out, and I'm not trying to mess with anything like that. Not for me. And then one day, all of us are home. I'm in my room, my mom's in her room, my dad's downstairs in the living room watching TV, and all of a sudden, all of the lights start flickering on and off. All of the hallway coat jackets, all of the closets open up, and stuff just starts getting thrown out of it. Now, this is the closet you could see directly in front of the living room that my dad saw just rip open, and just everything was closing out. What the fuck? At this point, heavy, intense, dark energy was flowing through, and a few days later, we get a call from the rental agency letting us know that the lady who owned the house passed away that night. I'm literally getting goosebumps. And then after this, right here in that door, my mom had a little half curtain. After that day, there was this big, dark shadow of a man just standing in front of the door. At first, I thought maybe it was just my reflection or something, but all of us saw it. And one day, out of curiosity, we were like, "What is that? Maybe it's a trick of the mind." So all three of us opened the door. No shadow, close it, full shadow figure of a tall, big man just standing in front of the door. Now this shadow, it did nothing to us. It didn't feel any negative presence of it, but it was there until the day we left that house. Like I said, after we found out the homeowner had passed away, a lot of the activities started ramping up. It was almost every single day, and at this point it started getting more aggressive, but it was definitely more towards me. I was the one experiencing the most. My parents saw a few things, but I was experiencing a lot of the hostility. And I don't have enough time, so I have to do a part 2.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
This is not so much ghost story as it is paranormal. And is it really paranormal or just something going on with my own mind? I'll tell the story. You can decide for yourself. This goes back to when I was in my 20s, back in the early 1980s. And a bunch of us young, hard-working guys decided that we wanted to go out and have a party on a Saturday night. Now, we were a pretty responsible group of guys, so we picked out ourselves a designated driver, and we set it up so that he'd take care of everything, and the rest of us were good to go. So we went down to our bar, and we proceeded to do just that. Well, pretty deep into the party, there was an emergency call came into the bar, and our designated driver had to leave. It was a serious emergency. I don't remember what, but there was no getting around it. So he had to leave, which left the rest of us in a pretty stuck position. because this was before there was Uber, and in this particularly rural town that I was in, there was no taxi service. So some of the guys were able to find their way home, me not so much. And I made a bad decision. I thought I could make it. Yeah, it was probably only a 3 to 5 mile drive from that bar to where I lived. Got in the car, started driving home, and sure enough, I passed out behind the wheel. And I was awakened shortly thereafter by the blaring of horns, and I mean very big horns, and I woke up and I am getting ready to dead center punch an 18-wheeler. Now, my hands were at about 10 and 2. My hands were probably about 1 and 3. I tried to turn the wheel to avoid the collision, and that steering wheel would not turn. And I looked down there, and in between my hands was another set of hands that were not mine. They were long, they were about twice as long as mine, bony, grayish blue with black fingernails. They looked like those Halloween gloves that you can buy at Spirit Halloween. They looked just exactly like that, but they were on that steering wheel. And the part that I've never got over was if those hands were on that steering wheel, where was the rest of the body? I couldn't see that. So I try and turn this wheel, it will not move. The gas pedal is pegged all the way down, even though my feet are not on any of the pedals. Well, the adrenaline kicked in. I was a pretty big old farm boy back in those days, and I grabbed that wheel and cranked it just as hard as I could. And the instant I did, those hands disappeared. The gas pedal let off. I slapped the brakes, but I instantly lost control of the vehicle. Went off the road, down through a ditch, and right through a farmer's wooden fence. Came to a stop in his field. Got out, took a look. Yeah, I made it. I was alive. I was scared as could be, but I was alive and looked like my car could drive. Well, right about that time, pickup pulled up behind me. 2 guys got out, came down, checked on me. Yeah, I'm okay. Looks like my vehicle's drivable, blah, blah, blah. You okay, son? Yes, I am. They took off, and I could tell that they knew I'd been drinking. And I could pretty much predict what was going to happen next, and sure enough, real shortly after they left, a state patrolman pulls up. He comes out, looks at what's going on, comes down, talks to me. Yes, sir. I'm fine. Vehicle's drivable. 1 car accident. Blah, blah, blah. Make you nice, right? This old state patrolman, he looks at me. Now, at that time, I was 6 foot tall and about 235 pounds. This guy looks at me. He reaches over, grabs a handful of my shirt with his left hand, lifts me up, and looks me right dead in the eye and says, "Son, you get home, and you make sure I do not regret giving you a second chance." Yes, sir. Don't have to tell me twice, sir. Thank you, sir. Well, I headed home. It was just a few hundred yards down the road, quite honestly. Went in, dove in bed, got me a couple hours of very necessary sleep, woke up, choked down a couple of cups of instant coffee, grabbed the farm truck and all the tools I needed, and headed right back to where my car had gone to that fence. I was stopped up there on the road, on the embankment, ran down there, tore out the old broken boards, grabbed my rakes and shovels, fixed up his pasture as best I could, grabbed some boards, hammered them back in. Fortunately, everything was white. It was all whitewash, easily matched. I painted it up. I was working just as quietly and as quickly as I possibly could because I wanted to get out of there before the crack of dawn and before anybody knew what had happened. So I'm packing up the last of my tools into the truck, getting ready to leave, and I hear behind me the slow clap. I turn around, and there sat the farmer on his porch. And yeah, old Betsy was leaning up against the wall right next to him. He looks at me and says, "I really appreciate you taking responsibility for that, young man. I'm glad I didn't have to look you up later." Yes, sir, I'm glad of that too. I looked down at him. What could I say? I said, "Well, sir, I am sorry for any inconveniences. Does this look good enough?" And he looks at me and says, "Yes, sir, that looks mighty fine. You have yourself a good morning." So I climbed back into my truck, headed home, and started my day. But that is the story of the very last time that I ever drove under the influence. Happy, oh boy.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
All right, then. My name is Darren Robinson. I'm one of the guitar players in the band Phantom Planet, best known for our song California, in case you're unfamiliar. I do have a couple of ghost stories. The first one I'm going to tell it will be in this video, and it's sort of what got me started, not necessarily believing in the paranormal, but maybe thinking that there's something to it. The other two videos that I'm going to upload will be connected, and they're pretty amazing. So, with that being said, when I was in 8th grade, I had a friend named Corey, and I met him in junior high, and I found out not too long after getting to know him that he actually was a neighborhood friend, and I could walk to his house from my parents' place. So in 8th grade, he invited me to one of his birthday parties that was just me, him, and one of his neighborhood friends. It was just a very small get-together. And we were hanging out at his house all day. It was very hot because it was in June, I believe. It was a very hot summer month. And there was no air conditioning in his house, just a couple of fans. So, we were pretty hot the majority of the time that we were there. And, we messed around throughout the day. And as night approached, Corey said, I have a Ouija board here that was my grandmother's. And it's up on the highest shelf. We never use it. And by the way, she died in that room also. Now, Corey was a bit of a prankster, so I didn't really believe him necessarily, but it was interesting regardless, and I figured I would go along with it since it was his birthday, and we were just trying to have some fun. So we get up, we go into the game room, we go up onto the highest shelf, we pull down the Ouija board, which is a very old Ouija board. This is not like a Parker Brothers, you go and buy it for $15. This was not one of those. This was definitely an ancient, earlier Ouija board, and really well made, beautiful board actually. And we took it, we went into the dining room, which was, 20 feet away, 25 feet away, put it down, put our fingers on the planchette, or the pointer, whatever you want to call it. And I remember looking at Corey and just saying, okay, I'll ask the questions. And I asked, and I said, who's with us? And after a couple of minutes, finally it started to move. Of course, I thought Corey was moving it, being a prankster and all. And he looked at me with this like dumbfounded look on his face. And I could tell he wasn't joking around. So eventually it said, my name is Sue. Sue was Corey's grandmother's name, the one that died in the house in the game room. So initially, again, it was very hard for me to believe that we were actually talking to Sue, but I figured I'd go along with it. Asked a couple more questions, and eventually I said, do you have any, what was it I said? Do you have any messages you want to give to us before I ask specific things? And she said, yes, I love you. Now, Corey said that when she died in the room, her last words were, I love you. So I took this as she was just getting out those final words once and for all, which was kind of interesting. And so that was the first thing that happened. Not much, but it gets a lot more interesting. I asked Corey's grandmother, I said, are you in heaven right now? And it should be known, I'm not a religious person. No offense to anybody who is, but I don't necessarily believe in heaven and hell and the concept of it. I'm open, but she said that she was in heaven and that she wasn't very happy. And that kind of took me aback. I'm like, why would she not be happy if she's in heaven? And immediately it came across my mind that maybe it's because she's not with her loved ones that are here. And I asked her that, and she said, yes, like I got it right. So finally, I'm like, okay, enough is enough. Can you prove that we're talking to you? Is there something you can do? And I also said, what is it like in heaven? And she paused for a second and then finally spelled out, go into Corey's room in 5 minutes. I swear to you, the thing was moving around real fast and it was talking essentially in paragraphs, which was a lot different than just the one word, yes or no responses. And so I look at Corey, he looks at me, I'm just like, come on, man, she had a concept of earthly time. Like the whole thing didn't make any sense. And I could tell again by the look on his face that he was a little fearful, and he wasn't quite sure what was going on. So I went along with it. After 5 minutes, we look at each other. We walk over to his room, which was another 25 steps away or whatever, and his door was closed. I'm like, all right, it added to the suspense. And eventually Corey finally, turns the knob, and we go inside. And no joke, the room was at least 30 degrees cooler than the rest of the house. And again, no air conditioning. There were fans in the house, but there were no fans in his room, so that made it even weirder. But aside from that, there was also a mist in the room. And when I say a mist, imagine walking into a room filled with smoke. That's what it felt like. But it wasn't smoke in the sense that you couldn't breathe. There was nothing obstructing our throats. So it was very easy to breathe, but we were looking around almost like able to move these clouds around, for lack of a better word. And we look at each other. This all happened very fast. And we just start screaming because we were scared to death. We didn't know what was going on. And eventually his mom ran in the room. She's like, what is going on? She started to yell at us because she thought that we lit off fireworks in the room, which is something that Corey and I were known for doing. He actually had a way of making homemade fireworks, and we were just like bad kids at certain points. So she started yelling at us, and we're like, no. We were using the Ouija board. We contacted your mom. Apparently, she told us to come in here, and now the room is cold, and there's clouds that we don't understand. And she saw it all and felt the room. So she was like, okay, I'm going to follow you guys back into back to where the Ouija board is, and I'm going to watch you do it, and I'm going to kind of gauge what's going on. So we leave the room, end up getting the Ouija board and putting it in the living room, which was in between where we were doing it and in between Corey's room. So it was right in the center of everything. Put it on the couch. His mom is on one side of the table, and Corey and I are sitting on the couch using the board. And I said, since it's Corey's birthday, is there anybody else here? Are there any other relatives here that we can talk to? And Sue immediately said yes. And then there was like a pause, as if it was like someone on a phone and they were looking for someone to hand the receiver over to. And eventually, after maybe 15 seconds, the pointer starts going really erratically, and it's moving differently than it had when Sue apparently had been moving it. And finally, it just says something to the extent of, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like, "What's up, assholes?" or "How are you sons of bitches doing?" It was very sarcastic and it was graphic. And I kind of laughed, and I look at Corey, I'm like, come on, man. Like, it's calling us names here. And Corey's mom looks at us. She's like, all right, what did it say? And I told her. She goes, no way. She goes, ask him what his name is. I'm like, okay. And before I could ask, it's like it heard Corey's mom ask, and it started to answer her, even with Corey and I having our fingers on the board. And it spelled out Jerry. And Jerry was Corey's uncle that he had never met before, who had that exact personality. He would call people assholes, sons of bitches. That was just his personality. And it kind of blew his mom away. And so that's part one of the story. The next two parts that I'm going to tell you are not connected to this specific story, but they will blow your mind. They're even more mind-blowing than what I've just told you. So stay tuned. Here we go, part two. So part one, I discuss my introduction to Ouija boards, and this is going to be now where the stories all intertwine with each other. So back around the time that I was about 21 or 22, which was quite a while ago, I went to my friend Carlene's house, and she lived 30 miles north of where I was. And she always had kind of like a psychic vibe about her. Not that she could tell the future so much, but she was just kind of like an empath, I guess is what you would call her. And she was very open to ghosts and the paranormal and all that stuff, as was I. But we both didn't necessarily believe, as I explained in the first video. Anyway, at one point we were at her place. This was her mom's house. And we decided to go up to her room and get the Ouija board out, and we did it. And while we're sitting there waiting for the pointer to move, I asked if anybody was there, and the first person, or first spirit, I guess, whatever you want to call it, came through and said his name was Don, as in Donald. And that's significant because my grandfather on my dad's side, his name was Donald, and I called him Grandpa Don. And he was very into supernatural stuff. When he was alive, I used to talk to him about Ouija boards, and he always told me not to use them, just because he believed that they can open a doorway to something bad. But I didn't listen to him, and I decided to try them anyway, and apparently I contacted him. And so we're sitting there, and I said, before we get started, this is just like the first story I told you, and that I said, do you have any messages for us before I ask you any questions? And I think he just said something to the extent of, I love you also. He was just being polite, you know? And so I was like, okay. And I said, well, how about this? Is there anything you could do to prove that we're talking to you? Is there something physical you could do that would really make us believe we're speaking with you? And without hesitation, he said, turn on channel 36, because there was a TV in her room. And oddly enough, my favorite number is 36, and it always has been since I was very young, for many different reasons. So I look at Carlene, and I'm like, all right, let's turn on the channel, on the TV, channel 36. So we turn it on, and Robin Williams is on TV with two kids in the snow. I forget what movie this is, so I can't give you that reference, but anybody who knows Robin Williams movies, if you know him being in the snow with two kids, you can probably find the scene. Anyway, it's him in the snow, and I look at Carly, and I'm like, I don't know why he's telling us to turn this on. And we put our fingers back on the pointer, and I said, Dawn, can you tell us why we're turning on channel 36? What's the significance here? And just as I said that the second time, all of a sudden Robin Williams looks at the boy in the snow, and he goes, Donald. 3 times he said my grandfather's name. And the timing of that was just like spooky, right? So I look at Carly, and I'm like, that's scary. That's a little scary. And finally I said to her, I said to Dawn, I said, okay, do you have any messages for us now? Because now we believe that we're talking to you. And he said, he spelled out Sam, LAX, drunk. Now, Sam is the bass player in Phantom Planet. That he's always been in the band. And he's in Maroon 5 now, of all bands. And he's also in our band. And Sam likes to drink, but he's not a big drunk or anything like that, and he's super responsible. But I took it as Sam is at the airport and he's drunk, so don't let him drive. So I started thinking, like, okay, how do I contact Sam? I tried calling him, couldn't reach him. And then I called Adam Levine, of all people. This is before he was famous. They lived together. So we've known Adam and Maroon 5 for many years, which is why Sam is in their band currently. And I call Adam, and he answers the phone. I'm like, hey, I didn't tell him anything about the Ouija board because I didn't want him to think I was absolutely out of my mind. And I said, where are you right now? And he goes, I'm driving. I'm going to the airport. I'm like, you're going to the airport? Where are you going? Why are you going to the airport? He's like, oh, I'm going to pick up Sam. It's like, holy shit. Okay. So I didn't know Sam was at the airport at this time. And obviously it was the Ouija board that informed me. So I said, listen, when you get Sam, if he's drunk, just do me a favor and don't let him drive. He's like, yeah, of course. I'm not going to let him drive if he's drunk. He's like, you're scaring me, by the way. And then we hung up, and that was that. 30 minutes later, 45 minutes later, whatever, Sam calls me. And he goes, okay, first of all, you scared the shit out of Adam. What's that about? And he goes, and how did you know I was at the airport? And how did you know that I was drunk? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I didn't tell him the story. I just said, oh, something came over me, and I figured I might as well act on it than regret it later. And he's like, well, you know me, I like to get a little buzz, but I'm not driving. I'm not, I would never do that. I was like, okay. And so that was that story. What else happened that night? I think that was it. At Carlene's house, that was it. So I ended up going back to my parents' place a couple days later. And I went with Carlene, and we brought the Ouija board because I told my parents what had happened. And, you know, they're open to, none of us are religious, but they're definitely open to the idea of it maybe being real. But they wanted to see it. And I'm like, cool, you know, we'll see if I could contact my dad's grandfather, or my dad's dad, my grandfather, my dad's dad. And if I can, then we'll do it, and you guys can ask them questions. So sure enough, we get to my parents' place, we get the Ouija board out. My parents are sitting on the couch. There's a coffee table that the Ouija board is on, and then Carlene and I are on the other side, sitting on the floor with our hands on the pointer. And I said, can we talk to Don? And not much hesitation, he came through again, strongly, by the way. And I asked him a couple questions. One of them, by the way, was, I said, you know, I'm in Phantom Planet now, I'm in this band. This is really early on. And I said, do we have any songs on this new record? Because we had just made the record that California was on, called The Guest. Do we have any singles on this record? And he spelled out California and Lonely Day. And those two songs were singles off that record. So that was interesting, but that's not where it ends. So the end of this part 2 is when my parents kind of huddle together, and I can tell they're like thinking of a question to ask. And while Carlene and I have our fingers on the board, my parents asked the question, and they said, all right, if you're Don, how did you die? Now, I was told that he had emphysema because he was a cigarette smoker, and that he passed away because of that. And I was convinced that that's what it was. And Carlene didn't know the answer. She didn't know who Don was. And so we sit there for a minute, and it starts answering my parents. We didn't have to ask. Carlene and I didn't have to ask the question. My parents asked. And it spelled out emphysema. Or no, it spelled out vein in head. And I look at Carlene, and I'm like, vein in head? That's not right. And my parents didn't hear it. They look at me, they're like, all right, what did he say? And I said, well, it spelled out vein in head. And man, this freaks me out. But my parents looked at me like dumbfounded. Their faces went pale white. And they said, this is impossible. You didn't know that because we told you he had emphysema, and he did have emphysema. But then they proceeded to tell me that the doctor told him that he had a vein in his head that if it ruptured, he would pass away, and it would be a pretty peaceful way to go, but also it would just be like instant, you know. And so that's what it said. And my dad also told me that when they found my grandfather at his place in Oxnard, California, that they found him on the couch, still holding a newspaper, sitting upright, and they said that it looked like he had just a peaceful exit into the afterlife. So that's part 2. Part 3 gets even crazier, and it has everything to do with what I've just told you. So stay tuned, and stay tuned. It gets really interesting. All right, guys, this is part 3. This is where everything comes together from part 2. So hopefully you've seen part 2, you remember everything about it, and here we go. In the early 2000s, my band Phantom Planet played at the House of Blues in Chicago, and after the show, we went outside. The band was doing pretty well at the time, and we were signing autographs and doing that whole thing. And while we were doing that, in the very back, all the way the back, there was a girl who was kind of staring at me, and it was a very intense, almost like she was staring through me kind of a vibe. And it didn't creep me out, but I knew that I wanted to talk to her, and I figured I would get to her last, just so I could have a real conversation with her. So, you know, I'm looking on the left side of me, the right side of me, getting all the autographs done, saying hello to everybody. Finally, I get to her. I'm like, all right, what's your deal? Like, something's up. I could see it in your eyes. And she looks at me and she goes, would you believe me if I said I was a psychic? Or just that she was psychic. And I'm like, well, I'm open to it. If you have any good stories, I'm definitely open to it. And she looks at me a little bit more and she goes, have you ever used a Ouija board before? And that really, this is early on when the internet wasn't a thing, so there's no way she could have known anything. I had never told my stories online, especially at that point. And so I look at her and I'm like, yeah, actually, I have used a Ouija board and I have some crazy stories. She's like, yeah, I thought so. She goes, how about this? My name is Siobhan, and if you feel comfortable, give me your email address. And if I ever have any stories to tell you, I'll just email you and I'll share it with you. And you could write back, or you don't have to bother, whatever you want. I'm like, all right, no harm there. So I gave her my email address, and we get back from that tour. I get home, a couple days pass, and then I check my email, and sure enough, there is a message from Siobhan, the first one. So there's 3 messages that she gave me consecutively, so 3 days in a row. The first message said, she gave me a story about her on the freeway and this whole thing, and I'm not going to tell that story just because it doesn't really further this, but it was a pretty incredible story. And she's like, I also did the Ouija board the other night, and this guy named Don contacted me. And she told me this, and I'm reading this, and I'm like, holy shit. She doesn't know my grandfather's name was Don, or that I've apparently contacted him through Ouija boards, and I have all these stories. So I was pretty amazed when she said that. But then she went on to say that she asked her friend if maybe it was her dad or a relative, and her friend said no. And then she told me that her father's name was Don, but he was still alive, so that didn't make any sense. And at that point, I just decided to not tell her that my grandfather's name was Don, just to see what would happen, So I wrote her back, and I just told her that was, really cool stories. If she has anything else, just let me know. And that was that. Next day, I wake up, go to my email. Sure enough, there's another message from her. And what was this message? The second message was, I'm trying to remember because there's 3 in a row. She said, do you by any chance have any sisters? And I said, no. I wrote her back. I'm like, no, I have one sister, but that's it. She's like, well, Dawn asked me to say hi to Stacy and Lori. So Stacy's my sister's name, and Lori's my mom's name. She thought it was 2 sisters. Again, this information wasn't online, so she got the names right, and it kind of blew my mind. And so that was that. Third day, I wake up, and this is where the story ends, and man, it freaks me out still saying this. It kind of makes me tear up sometimes, but I've told it so many times that I could probably do it without having that happen. She writes me the third day, and she says, Don contacted me again, and he said to tell the boy I say hello, and say hi to Harv for me. So my grandpa Don called me the boy to my parents, and my dad's name is Harvey, and my grandfather never called him Harvey. He only called him Harv, Harv. And again, this information was not online. There was no way she could have known it. And this was the 3rd day in a row that she had written to me. And then at the very end of this, she said, there was one more thing that happened, one more thing that he said, but I really don't think this relates to you at all. I just think it's an interesting story. Does Robin Williams have any significance to you? And it's giving me goosebumps right now. It freaked me out and confirmed that there's something going on here, It's like, you don't really believe in ghosts or paranormal stuff until you have a firsthand experience like what I had. And for what it's worth, I'm still friends with Siobhan to this day. She's actually in the Phantom Planet Patreon, so we still talk. I'm still friends with my friend Carlene, who I mentioned in part 2. And I still actually know Corey, who was my junior high friend from the first part of this story. But does Robin Williams have any significance to you is like absolute confirmation to me. I told my parents afterwards and was just freaking out, and they were convinced at that point. So I think that's it. I think that's the whole story, but pretty good stuff. Okay, so there's one more thing that I didn't mention. After the second email that I got from Siobhan, when she said, who's Stacy and who's Lori, I then told her that my grandfather's name was Don. and that I had contacted him through the Ouija board. So that was why she said, I don't think this story relates to you, but does Robin Williams have any significance? Man, it still freaks me out. Anyway, that's part 3. That's all my stories. Enjoy.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, I'm gonna try really hard to summarize this because I could literally talk about this forever. I'm gonna tell you guys my dad's story because I have my own that I think is really, really freaky, but his is like another level. When my dad was a teenager, he was a little more on the rebellious side, and my grandma was very, very religious. She always has been. And so when his friend came over with Ouija board and said, "Do you want to do this?" He was like, "Okay, sure." I think also at the time people were more acute to believe that Ouija boards weren't real because we didn't have the internet and we weren't able to hear people's stories about this. So it's my dad, my dad's friend, and my dad's brother, so my uncle. They all decide to do it together because they're all friends. They sit down, they open the board, and they have the spirit come through. It's a girl, she says she's a pilgrim, I don't remember the name, and they talk to her, and it's fine, they have a good experience. So because they had a good experience and it was fun, they did it again and again. They did it about 2 or 3 times. Everything was fine every single time until the last time they ever used it. The last time they ever used a Ouija board, they sat down and they were talking to this one specific spirit. Again, she's the only one that they ever talked to. While they're talking to her, she's in the middle of spelling something out, the board stops, and the pattern, the way it starts to move starts to change. So pretty immediately they could tell that it's not her anymore, there's something else there, and they're kind of confused. So they ask, is someone else here? The board moves to yes, and they're like, okay, who are you? And it starts to spell out a name. I'm not going to say the name because I believe names have power and it genuinely scares me, but I will fingerspell it. Okay, it's pretty easy to figure out who this is, you'll see. And the way that the board is moving now is different. It's ominous. It like has a negative energy to it. So they ask the person or whoever, they ask the spirit, what do you want? Like, why are you here? Why did you get rid of the other spirit? The board starts to spell out over and over again, I want to kill you. I want to kill you. Over and over. So this is enough for them. They close out the board, they don't talk about it, they never use it again, they don't touch it. But obviously this experience stuck with my dad. It's scary. So when he became an adult and Google had just kind of become a thing, he decides to Google it and see if there's any information about this spirit. Nothing comes up. There's not much on Google at this point, so he's like, oh, okay, whatever. A couple years later, once it's a little bit more established, he Googles again, and there's a little bit more information. Other people are talking about this and the experiences that they've had, and he's like, oh, that's really weird. And then when the internet becomes fully established, YouTube's a thing, Reddit's a thing, it's there. He Googles it a 3rd time, and at this point, there's a full-length feature film about it, YouTube videos, Reddit threads, like thousands of people talking about how they've had an experience with this one specific spirit. That's why I said it's really easy to figure out who this is if you actually want to. I wouldn't really recommend, I don't. So of course this terrifies him. He's like, oh my god, like that's crazy. And I 100% believe my dad because I grew up hearing the story before the internet was a really established thing, so I know he's not making it up. So yeah, I definitely have a handful of my own to tell, but that is my dad's.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
I've got one for you. So when I was 19, I moved into this house after a breakup, and I found this room on Facebook Marketplace. This girl was selling her room or whatever, subleasing it, and it was, I think, $250 a month, and I was like, yeah, let's go. So I moved into this place, and it is a very old home. It was made out of local stone, and it was on this block that all the houses were made out of local stone, and if they weren't made out of local stone, they would not still be standing. I'll just say that. They're very old. So this house had been converted into separate apartments, and I was living in a room that you had to walk through a bathroom to get to, and this room was also connected to another bedroom, but we just put like furniture in front of it, so it kind of felt like a bedroom. So that's where I was staying, and the first night that I was sleeping there, I was woken up out of a dream, don't know what I was dreaming about, and I saw this woman just like hovering over me, looking at me. And I looked at her for a few seconds, and when she realized I was looking at her, I just saw her eyes get really wide, and she looked nervous, and she disappeared. And I've never really given that a lot of credit because I was waking up out of a dream, you know, sometimes you just see things, I don't know. But then the next day when I was leaving to go do something else, you know, I was opening my door, going through the bathroom to get out of the house. I swore that I saw someone like crouched in the corner of the shower. And I thought that was weird. But because the night before and how I was like, that was probably just a dream. I'm probably just paranoid right now. I'm not going to give it any credit. So time goes on, right? And I get a cat. Love the little thing. She's precious. And it gets to a point where, I'm 19. I'm full-time college student. Her food was more expensive than mine, and I couldn't afford to keep her anymore. So one of my friends took her, and I noticed as soon as she was gone that things started to get a little hairy. Like from that day forward till I moved out, every single day something happened. Didn't matter if it was daytime, nighttime, or anything. But that little figure that I had seen crouched in the shower was a little boy. And he was very upset that my cat was not there anymore. So what did he do? He terrorized me. Like, it got to the point where I had to rearrange my room so when I would wake up and roll over in the middle of the night, I wouldn't see him because he would stand in the corner where I had my cat's stuff as if like protesting that she was gone. And that was every single night from that point on. During the day, I would have hangers and clothes fly out of my closet. Did not matter. Door would open, closet and clothes would just fall out. And it became a normal thing, like I would see him and I wouldn't think twice about it because I didn't want to engage. I didn't want to encourage it. So what I would do is I wouldn't say anything. If he was really scaring me, I'd go to someone else's house. I just dip out because like child spirits, you don't really know if it's a real child or not. I think this was a real child because he was just throwing tantrums and taking it all out on me. The scariest thing that ever happened with him though was I was doing laundry one day. I guess my cat had probably been gone for a couple months now, and I'd become adjusted to seeing him. It wasn't anything new. And I was folding my laundry on my bed, and I watched him crawl out of my closet, look at me, and crawl underneath my bed. It actually makes me sick to my stomach, even thinking about it, because I don't know if you've seen any scary movie. It was horrifying. So yeah, I dipped. I didn't come back for like 2 days because that was horrifying. And before I left though, I did get on my hands and knees and look under the bed to see if he was there. One of the bravest moments of my life, he wasn't. And at that point, I was already done. I didn't care that I didn't see him. I was done. So, my laundry was clean. It didn't matter. I dipped. And from that point on, it never got that bad again, but he was almost always in the shower when I would be leaving. And the way that our bathroom was set up, like the mirror faced the shower, and there would be times where like I would be getting ready. I'm crying. I would be getting ready and I would see his little stinking head pop up in the mirror. And I had to start sleeping with a face mask because I would roll over in the middle of the night and he would either be in the corner of my cat's stuff or he would be at the end of my bed or he'd be in another corner. Like it was something straight out of Insidious. And I'd say that's one of the worst ghost stories I have at that house, definitely, because I never saw that woman again. There was one figure I kept seeing in the kitchen, but I never saw their face. They only stood with their back to me. So, I think our timelines were just crossing or something, but no one else in the house that lived there ever had any encounters that I know of. And yeah, so that's how I was terrorized by a little child, ghost, spirit, for having to get rid of a cat, for being poor, essentially.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
If you scare easily, go ahead and exit right now. When my grandmother was in hospice, she hospiced under the care of my mom and my aunt,
in this home. As it got closer to the end, my grandma would kind of swat and be like, do you see them? Do you see them? They're just flying all around me. They're flying all around me. She would also say that she sees a man in the corner. One day my mother was in the bathroom doing her hair and my aunt was going to the store. While my mom was in the bathroom doing her hair, she felt a huge gust of wind, as if like somebody was like walking by and walking through our hallway, and they're walking fast and like with a purpose, like startled my mom. Then she peeked outside the door and she's calling for my aunt. She's like, Pat, is that you? And it wasn't my aunt. And then it happened again and she sees somebody like walking by and my mom was like, what the heck is going on? My mom just gets this really weird feeling and she goes into my grandma's room and she's like, hey mom, are you okay? And my grandma was like, did you see him? And my mom was like, yeah mom, I saw him. He starts speaking to it, starts saying, hey, I think I know who you are. We're not ready for her to go. And my mom said that it was a cloaked figure, like a pale cloaked figure with like a button-up shirt with a high collar, like ruffled high collar up to here, ruffles on the sleeves, and like a hat that Abraham Lincoln used to wear, like a top hat. Like a few days passed. My grandma is watching Judge Judy because that's what my grandma loved, Judge Judy. And my mom is in there and Judge Judy had just gone off and my mom goes in there and she's like, hey mommy. Asked my grandma if she wants to watch the Today Show now because Gladys Knight and the Pips are going to be performing. And my mom has her back turned to my grandma and my grandma's back here laying down. And my mom says, she's like, hey mom, do you want to watch the Today Show? Gladys Knight and the Pips are on. And my grandma said, no, he's here. And my mom says, who's here, mom? And when my mom turned around, my grandma had passed. Like my grandma was dead. She was gone. She said, no, he's here. And she was gone. It was the angel of death. Angel of death came and took her soul. Yeah, he's here.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Me, I have one. So growing up, I lived in North Carolina and our house was 1000% haunted. My sister follows me on here. Like, if she sees this video, she'll corroborate my story because Jesus fucking Christ. So when I was little, my dad was overseas. He was in the military. And so then when he came home, I think I was probably like 8, maybe 9. No, I was 8. And when he came home, I was like, oh, I want to sleep in the bed with daddy. Like, I want to sleep with dad. And he's like, yeah, of course. So I slept in his bed and his door was open. And I was up that night late reading with a flashlight because I was like, oh, I'm going to blow his socks off reading this book to him. And that night, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. And it was like keys jangling. And so I like go under the covers, have the covers up to here. And in the doorway, I see an apparition of my father. My dad is laying next to me, but I see my dad as plain as day. Oh, it makes me sick just thinking about it. He is like a little bit transparent, like I can kind of see through him, but it's my father. It's 2000s, glasses on the back of the head, spiked cargo shorts with the keys on the carabiner. Like, it was exactly my dad. Then he starts going, come here, Vivian. It's my name. Come here, Vivian. And I was like, oh, way. And I put my covers over my head. And when I looked back out, he was gone. I have so many other stories about that house, but that's the one that sticks with me the most because it scared me so bad. I'll tell you one. I don't remember this. This was told to me by my dad because I was a baby when it happened. But so there is basically 3 stories for our house. There's like the downstairs level that has a pool table, like billiards. And we are on the top floor. So 3 floors above that. And I'm a baby, like baby, sleeping in my crib, can't get out. And then one night, my dad hears me crying. And he goes to my room, crib empty, no baby. He starts freaking out, obviously. And he's searching around the house, following my cry. I'm downstairs, 3 stories down, on top of the pool table. I'm sat on the pool table, like holding a pool ball, crying. I'm telling you, I was probably like 14 months, 15 months. You cannot get out of your crib. Nor could I walk down all those stairs and then get on top of a pool table. Then what? And in that house, me and my sisters, we were on top of the stairs. They're a lot older than me, and they know this story. We were on top of the stairs and we were looking down into the darkness. Nobody else was home. And we were just like playing with a bouncy ball, like throwing shit down there. You know how kids are stupid. And we threw a bottle cap down there, and it threw back at us. Like,
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
All right. So, like a lot of people on this trend, this is not my usual content, but I think it's a cool opportunity for all of us to tell our story, and I thought I would share mine. So, in 2011, I was a camp counselor at a Christian sports camp in Golden, Missouri, and I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. It was just supposed to be a summer job in between semesters, and wow, it actually kind of changed my life. So this camp was broken up into two major demographics. The way they marketed their camp, one of their camps was marketed more towards wealthy white campers, and the other camp, which is the one I worked at, was more geared towards at-risk communities, Black and Latinx individuals, high school kids. And so for me, I felt that that was going to be the most impactful. I didn't really want to have a job that didn't mean anything to me. I wanted to do something bigger than myself. And at the time, I was super immersed in church, and I thought this was a cool opportunity to share my gifts and maybe be a mentor for some of these kids. So historically, some of these campers that get brought in, and they're brought in from all across the country. Some of them have gotten violent. There's been contraband brought in. So we had to have a week of preparation. Just the leaders, the camp counselors, and the directors would prepare the counselors for summer camp. It was broken up into 3 sessions, the camp itself. The training was just a week in May, and there were sessions from June all the way to end of July. So I was the second session and the third session, which was 6 weeks long. During the training, mind you, it was very military style. We would have to wake up at a certain time. We would have to have our cabins completely cleaned before we left. When the campers did come, we were told that we had to have them in straight lines, and they had to sit down. It was just very drill sergeant, which I didn't know it was going to be that. They didn't market it for it to be that. So that was my first surprise. During the training, I was pulled aside and was told by the directors and a couple leaders, hey, David, you fit the body build, and you fit the fact that you don't have any tattoos. We need you to play Jesus in this reenactment that we do called Crosstalk every 4th day. So as they're explaining to me what Crosstalk was, they had a laptop and they opened it up and they showed me scenes of the Passion of the Christ, which I had never seen because I knew it would be too disturbing for me to see. So the fact that they just kind of opened up the laptop and just showed me without my consent was my first big red flag. They walked me through what the reenactment would be like. It didn't seem like I could get hurt. It didn't seem dangerous in any way. At the time, I was very immersed in my church. I was raised in a Christian household growing up. So in a way, this felt like an honor to be selected. But that night, And maybe it was a couple nights after, I just felt super uneasy. I remember laying in bed, and the way my bed was, it was bunk bed style cabins in the boondocks, well, I guess the Ozarks of Golden, Missouri. And so it's easy to get spooked out there at night, but it just felt like someone was watching me. Like the way when I was laying, I could see the screen door to outside, and it just felt like someone was standing there watching me. And that unease continued after the training. And when I got home, I would have these horrible nightmares. I had a nightmare where, and I'll never forget, we were all getting given letters written by Satan, and on the front of the letter, it was a tree. And at the top of the tree was Satan. At the bottom of the tree was God. And on the back of the letter, it was Satan's name written all over it. And as soon as I read the letter, I was instantly back at camp at night. And I could see a building kind of in the distance. And I heard someone coming out of that building. And out loud in my dream, I said, "You know what Satan's doing, but you still let him in." And I just had awful dreams, sort of like that. Just kind of evil type of dreams. One of them, there was blood written above my room that said, "Satan's in your room." So it got to a point where I was like, I need somebody to pray over me. So I had someone from my congregation pray over me. I was around my family. It was about a week and a half until I would go back to Golden, Missouri. So it did kind of settled down after people prayed over me, after I kind of spoke about how uneasy I was feeling. It went away, but then it definitely came back when I got back to the camp. So I got there a day before my 6-week session started, and I was talking to some of the other leaders, trying to get the lay of the land, tips, tricks of the trade, all that. And some of the leaders were saying to me that campers were complaining about shadowy figures standing above their bed at night. And I was like, okay, like, whatever, dude. Like, okay, kids being kids, or like you're just trying to scare me. Didn't think anything of it. So I jumped into my sessions, and the first crosstalk happened, and I was super nervous, and it was a lot more intense than I thought, a lot more intense than the leaders and directors made it seem. And as the weeks progressed, it got more and more violent. Um, I'll never forget, there was one week that the director came up to us backstage and said, "We really need to sell it tonight." And that's when I believe I got a concussion, because I was hit so hard. And the people who were supposed to be the guards and in the reenactment, they were bodybuilders, they were ex-football players, they were big dudes. So it was already just, it wasn't right. So as each week passes, we get different groups of kids each week, mind you. So as each week passes, I'm starting to feel just heavier and heavier. Especially around the fourth day, I would be in tears right after having to do this reenactment. I kind of chalked it up to just having spiritual experience. I think it was a lot deeper than that. And so like my mood was very heightened. I felt almost like a veil was being lifted. I say that to say there was this one time, and it was during 4th of July. The camp threw a party, a 4th of July party, and a kid had split his pants. Something stupid. So I had to walk this kid up back to his cabin to make sure that he, changed his pants. We couldn't keep these kids couldn't be alone. That was part of our rules, so they had to be accompanied when certain things like this happen. So I was like, all right, run into the cabin. I'll wait outside. So as we're walking up to the cabin, we hear what sounds like a parade in the distance. We can't see anything, but we hear, to me, it sounded like drums, like percussion. And then it sounded like a chainsaw. And then it sounded like drums again. So I couldn't figure out what that sound was. And as I'm thinking about what that sound was, not too far in front of us was a patch of trees. And we both stop in our tracks because we see this figure this person walking amongst the trees, walks behind a tree, and disappears, completely disappears. Now, at the time, I was like, okay, there's someone here that shouldn't be here. So I went into the patch of trees to look to see who it was, what was going on, and no one was there. Nobody was there. There was no sign of anybody there. The kid next to me saw it. I saw it. He ran inside, changed his pants, came out, and I told the directors about this, and I described the person. It was someone just, wearing jeans. It seemed like a white man, a older white man, basic looking, and the directors say, yeah, we saw him before when we were trying to build this place. He came up to us, and part 2 is coming up.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
I have a ghost story for you. Okay, I have a few, but I'm going to share with you my favorite one. Let me set the scene first. So, this was at least 10 years ago. I was recently married. My son was a baby at this time. I don't remember exactly how old he was. We lived in a little rental house that was old, and it had a back bedroom that was our bedroom, but the bedroom was an add-on that had been stuck onto the house at a later time. So, it didn't have its own hallway. The way that you got into this room was either through our son's bedroom or through the kitchen. Okay. So I had a corner desk set up in the room, and that was where I would just sit and do like my drawing. So I have my little swiveling office chair, has my corner desk, my back is to the doors. So on the night in question, my husband is in the kitchen, so again, right behind our room, cooking dinner, and I'm sitting at the desk working on drawings or whatever. So I'm like hyper focused on whatever I'm doing. Our son is in his room asleep. My husband's in the kitchen cooking. The door between our room and the kitchen is open. The door between our room and the baby room is closed. Okay, so as I'm sitting at my desk, focusing on my drawing, I become aware that my husband has now left the kitchen and is in our room. I can hear him walking around behind me. It sounds like he maybe had gone into the closet, shuffled around and grabbed something. And then like the old wooden floors are kind of creaky. So whenever someone takes a step, especially if you're like walking sort of just like slowly, you can hear like creaks in the floor, and you can kind of almost feel the floor moving as you're sitting in a chair, right? Okay. So after a little bit of him pacing around kind of behind me, I feel him walk up next to me, or like right behind my chair. And so I know he's right behind me because, usually like you're sitting in your swiveling chair and it moves with you. Well, at one point I can tell that he's standing directly behind me, like with maybe his like chest up against the back of the chair or something, because the chair is held still. It's not moving around. So I'm sitting here drawing, but like the chair isn't moving with me. Okay. So then at some point I'm hunched over my drawing, I sit up like this, okay? And then I feel his hand on my shoulder, and it does sort of like a little like massage motion, and then like a little pat, and then he like rests his hand, just sitting his hand on my shoulder. And so I think he's just like watching me like drawing or whatever. And so I'm kind of like winding up my project anyway. So I like set my pen down, and then I didn't turn around and look at him. I just said something to him. Okay, I don't remember what I said, but as I'm saying it, I can still feel his hand like on my shoulder, right? So then, with this hand that is currently sitting on my shoulder, I hear from the kitchen, in a separate room, probably 25 feet away from me, I hear him say something like, "What did you say?" Or like, "Did you say something?" And I'm like, I cannot tell you the shock. If you have someone touching your shoulder and then you hear their voice speaking to you from another room. Okay, so obviously I spin the office chair around, right, to face the doors. And as I do that, I feel the hand like kind of roughly like pull away from my shoulder. And then this like freezing cold blast of air like kind of blast like past me or like through me. Enough so that it like blew my son's door open. So his door was just like cracked, and now it's like almost all the way open. And then I see my husband start walking in from the kitchen all casual. He's like holding a spatula, and he's like, "Did you say something?" And I'm like looking at him all like flabbergasted, like freaking out. And I'm like questioning him. I'm like, "Were you in here? Did you come in here? Like, when was the last time you came in here?" And he was like, "No, I've been in the kitchen just cooking away. I haven't even been in here at all. You've just been in here drawing. The baby's asleep. Everything's fine." So once it hits me that was absolutely no way not my husband in the room with me, then it kind of hits me like, oh my God, something went in from my room into our son's room. It like opened the door and went in there. So I like jump up, and I'm thinking I'm gonna go grab my sleeping baby out of the crib. My son is literally sitting up in his crib, just kind of like staring at his door. Like normally if he would be asleep in his crib and then wake up, he would immediately start like fussing or crying or like wanting me to come get him and get him out. No, he's just sitting there in the dark, staring at his door. So basically, I'm left to conclude that a ghost pretended to be my husband, mimicked my husband's like normal behaviors, gave me a shoulder massage, and then when he got busted, he just blasted out of there and he was freezing cold air. I still don't know what to make of this. I think about it on a regular basis. I do have a couple of other weird stories. One specifically was from that house, and I feel like the running thread through all of my like ghost encounters, it's always a ghost that I didn't see, but I hear them, feel them, and they seem to be copying what another person normally would do. So yeah, I do kind of want to tell the other weird story that happened in that house, and then another really weird one that happened in this gym that I used to work in. But yeah, I'll probably tell those later.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
My dad's side of the family has experienced a lot of tragic deaths, one of which was my dad's brother Richard, who passed before I was even born. He passed in a car accident in the middle of the night. And sadly, he and my dad were not on speaking terms at the time of his passing. They had just gotten into like a sibling spat. And about a week after his passing, my mom said she remembers laying in bed and getting a phone call. My dad rolled over, picked up, kind of mumbled a few words, and then hung up and laid back down. And my mom was like, "Who was that? Like, who called us in the middle of the night?" And he said, "Oh, it was just Richard. He was calling to tell me that everything's okay." And I can remember hearing the story and just getting immediate goosebumps. It never left my mind. Fast forward 15 years later, I'm living on the other side of the country with my dad's sister for an internship, and my cousin and I are kind of having, a catch up, telling family stories, and I bring up the story to him, and he just goes white in the face, and he says, You're kidding me. There's no way, right? That's not true." And I said, "Oh, absolutely. That's 100% true." So he's like, "Stay here." He runs down, he grabs my aunt, and my aunt's like, "You're not going to believe this, but I have almost the exact same story." A week later, after Richard's passing, she hears commotion in the house and she thinks someone's breaking in. It's in the middle of the night. So she tells my uncle to get up and kind of go sweep the house and see what's going on. As he's doing that, she said she feels a presence in the room, but she's not scared. It's calm. And she just feels a spirit walk over to her, lean down in bed, and give her a kiss on the cheek. And she said, "I knew it was my brother. I just knew." And she said, "I didn't kind of tell anyone at first because I didn't want to freak the family out. But eventually I told my mom, my Grammy, who had almost to a T the exact same experience. About a week after Richard's passing, she feels a presence in the room. He walks over, he leans over her in bed, he gives her a hug, he gives her a kiss. And she said it was the most warm, calming, sweet presence she's ever felt. And just to know that a week after, Richard visited 3 family members across the country just to let them know that he was okay.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
When I was 3 years old, my family and I moved out of a small apartment complex and into a big house. And during the viewing process of this house, my 3 older siblings and my mother went to go meet with the realtor to go check it out. Everything was going fine. They were mostly upstairs, and they loved everything so far, and then they reached the basement. When my family went into the basement, they saw dried droplets of blood splattered on the floor and on the walls. They found bird feathers, and then they saw a satanic symbol drawn on the wall. Now, the previous owners of this house belonged to a mother and her son, and according to this woman, she mostly lived upstairs, she let her son live in the basement. She said she kind of just let him do his own thing, left him alone because he was an adult. I am the youngest of 4 children, and my siblings are significantly older than I am. So naturally, being the only child in the house, the spirits really took a liking to me. When I was very young, it started off with just I'd be walking through the house and I would hear low-pitched growling coming from behind closed doors, closet doors. I distinctly remember this one time walking past the closet door in the basement, and I put my ear to the door to make sure that I was hearing what I thought I was hearing. And I was. And so I ran upstairs. I grabbed my mom. I was like, you need to go and open the door because there's something in there. And so she opens the door, and there's nothing in there. By the time I was age 10, it was no longer just low growling coming from behind closed doors, but it had also become banging on walls, things coming off of the walls. And I remember this one time I was home alone and I was upstairs, and there was just ruckus coming from the basement. It sounded like something was pounding on the wall. It sounded like something had flung off the wall and broke. And I was petrified, and I believed that someone had broken into my house because that's how bad it was. So I ran over to my neighbor's house and I was like, you need to come inside. You need to check to see if someone broke into my house because I think someone did. He goes inside. He goes in the basement. No one's there. And the older I got, the worse it became. So by the age of 13, it was no longer just hearing things, but I was also physically seeing figures in my home. When I was 13, the paranormal activity got increasingly bad, and it was so bad to the point where it was disrupting my sleep. Every single night I was woken up at 3 a.m. on the dot. At first it was just my TV would be turned on, or I'd hear like really creepy noises coming from my closet or like a dark corner. But then I finally saw it. Now, the way that my room was set up was I had a room upstairs, and my room was at the very end of this long, narrow hallway. And when I was laying down on my pillow in my bed, and my door was open, I could see directly down the hallway. So when I would be woken up at 3 a.m, I'd open my eyes, and I slept with my door open because I was so fucking scared. And when I would look down the hallway, I saw this very tall, dark figure. It was all black. Couldn't see its face, but I knew it was a man. I just knew. This figure, every single night, he would be standing at the end of the hallway, and he would walk slowly down the hallway into my room and stand at the foot of my bed and just try to intimidate me. My sleep had become so bad, and my mom didn't believe that I was seeing the figures that I was seeing, so she took me to a neurologist. She took me to several sleep studies, several sleep doctors, and of course, they all ran tests on me. The doctors could never come up with anything because my brain activity was normal, so they just conjured it up to me being a child, and it was just my imagination. It was all in my head. When I reached high school, most of my siblings had moved out of the house, and so I ended up taking my older sister's bedroom that was in the basement, which was very brave of me. But at this point in time is when the paranormal activity, it gets spicy. I would still be woken up at 3, 4 in the morning, but this time with physical pain. I would wake up with bruises on my body. I'd wake up with scratches on my body in threes. And one time it was so bad that I woke up from being choked. I would hear tapping on the walls, banging on the walls. I'd hear scratches. I would hear creepy ass growls, noises. And I also would often smell rotten eggs. At this point, I figured that whatever was haunting me was still the same entity that it was upstairs, the man I was talking about, but no. This time it was a woman because they took different shifts apparently. I don't fucking know. One of the very first times I had ever seen her, I was having a sleepover with my friends, and I was woken up in the middle of the night. Classic. And she was standing in the corner of my bedroom, and she was just standing there staring down at me. She had a long, tattered dress. Her limbs were all decrepit and broken, and her hair was long and ratty and dark, and I could not see her face. At this point in time, I had grown so accustomed to this shit that I just didn't care anymore. Like, it was a part of my life, and it didn't scare me. I remember waking up, looking at her, and being like, I'm going back to sleep. To reiterate, I never really spoke about this with my siblings. Again, my mom didn't believe me, and I had already grown indifferent to it, so it was just kind of whatever. But there was this one night. My brother was still living in the house, and he was the only sibling of mine living in the home. And it was Black Friday. I think I had to be like 18, I think, and I was at the mall with my friends. It was around 2 something in the morning, and I get a call from him. And he's like, "You need to come home right now. I am not going back into the house until you get here." This really freaked me out because my brother has had several experiences with like paranormal shit, and he's never been scared before. So I rush home, and he's standing outside, he's pacing, and I'm like, "What happened?" And he's like, I can't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it." I was like, "Okay, let's just go in the house together." So we go in the house, we go up the stairs, and we're in the kitchen. And at this point, like, I'm just trying to ground him, so we're just talking about like random things, you know. But finally, we decide that we're gonna go back downstairs into the basement into his room. But in order to do that, we have to pass that long, narrow hallway. And my family was sleeping, so all the lights were off. As we're passing the hallway, I hear a very low-pitched growl coming from the end of the hallway. I didn't say anything to my brother. I didn't look at him. I didn't act different. We get downstairs and we get into his room, and he looks at me and he says, "Did you hear that?" This was like the ultimate confirmation for me. Like, everything that I had been told regarding like it's all in your head, like it's not true, you're just a kid, whatever. It was finally confirmed that no, this was a real fucking experience. Finally, he tells me why he wouldn't go back in the house, like what scared him. And he told me that he was going out for a cigarette, and before he went out the front door, he had a really horrible feeling. He turned around, he looked up the stairs, and it was that woman that I had seen previously. He described her wearing the same thing, he described her looking the same, and he said that she was just standing at the top of the stairs, staring down at him, just trying to scare him. As the years passed, my brother and I finally, eventually, got them out of our house. It took a lot of time and intention, but we did it. After that, like, the paranormal activity was not as heavy or dense. I mean, things would move on their own and stuff like that, but it was not at all what it was before. When I was 23, my mom sold the house, and so I moved out. The very night that I moved out and into the new place, I had a dream of the 3 entities, demons that were haunting me, and finally they showed me their faces, and they were essentially like, "Goodbye, like, this is it, you've been released."
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go.
So I have a story from when I was 17 years old that to this day is unsettling to me and scary, and I still don't even know what to make of it, to be honest. But when I was 17, my best friend at the time, Matt, wanted to go visit his brother in Mississippi. Matt's brother was stationed in Mississippi with the Navy, and he lived in this house with his girlfriend and this other guy who was a Navy SEAL. I never met him, but I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, so the whole plan was to go to Mississippi, hang out with Matt's brother, and then we were gonna go to New Orleans and go hang out on Bourbon Street and do all that. The drive was about 2 or 3 hours for me and Matt. So while we're driving there, Matt decides to tell me then, "Hey, by the way, my brother's house is haunted, ha 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 ha. They've been having some problems, you know, isn't that crazy?" And I immediately got irritated that he didn't tell me that before. And if you guys don't know this about me, I grew up in a haunted house, and my parents had to have priests come through and bless the home and all that. So there's history there for me, and it's just uncomfy to me, and I don't want to be around it. And that's it. So we end up getting there. I meet Matt's brother and his brother's girlfriend, and they're super cool, and we're all talking, hanging out. They're telling us about, you know, what's been going on and all that stuff, and it was getting really bad for them. But they end up telling us a story about what happened in that house. And the story is really sad because it was a mother and her son, and the son was playing in the driveway, and he ran into the street and got hit by a car and passed away. And the mother, being depressed, on the ceiling fan in the living room. Guess where me and Matt were sleeping? In the living room, underneath the ceiling fan. And yeah, so first night, Matt decides to get really drunk, and everyone else goes to sleep. It's midnight, Matt blacks out, and he's dead asleep. And I'm I'm laying on the floor in the living room next to Matt. We had blankets and pillows, and we had a big flat screen TV in front of us, and I put on something happy, and I put on the movie Jackass. And I'm sitting there and I'm slowly nodding off. And do you know when you're sitting at night in front of a TV screen and you can kind of see the light flashing over your eyelids? You can like see the screen almost. So yeah, I was seeing that. So as I'm falling asleep, I start feeling footsteps pressing into the carpet around my body. And I thought it was maybe Matt. So I turn and look, and Matt's sleeping. So it wasn't Matt. And the footsteps keep walking around my body, especially around my face. I feel the carpet pressing in around me. And my body goes into this state of fear. I was like frozen, I felt paralyzed, and I didn't know what to do. And next thing you know, the screen in front of me goes black and I can hear Jackass playing, but it's just black, and I feel a heavy presence standing over me, and it felt like there was somebody standing over me, which is so unsettling to think about. And I start praying. That's like the only thing I feel like I was able to do. I just started like praying, like, God protect me, like put a veil over me. I don't want to see this. Like, please go away. I didn't know what to do, and I end up falling asleep. Don't know how, but I did. And yeah, we wake up. I told them what happened. They're like, oh yeah, that's, she walks through the hallway, she walks through the living room. And I was like, okay, that's creepy. So fast forward to the middle of the day. Matt's brother and his girlfriend, they go to work, and me and Matt are just hanging out at the house. We're in a good mood. We're not even thinking about anything, and we're sitting in the kitchen. So we're sitting in this round table in the back. So basically I'm sitting here and Matt is you. And behind me is a doorway, like a little bit further back behind me. And it goes to like the front door and then the hallway down to the bedrooms and then the living room. So me and Matt are eating boiled peanuts, talking, laughing. I have photos from this day, and we're in a great mood. And Matt looks right past me and he goes, I'll name Matt's brother's girlfriend, Sarah. He goes, Sarah. And I'm like, Matt, Sarah's not here. And he goes, Sarah. And I was like, Matt, Sarah's not here. And then the door slams at the end of the hallway. And me and Matt spring up without saying a word to each other and haul ass out of that house. I've never ran so fast in my life, like genuinely. Like, we sat outside of that house until his brother and his brother's girlfriend came back. And we did not go back in until they came back, and we told them what happened. And they said, like, it's normal, it's been happening, and it's creepy. So that's pretty much all we experienced, at least that I can remember. And fast forward to what I heard is that Matt's brother and his girlfriend at that time, they end up having to move out of that house. The Navy had to move homes for them because it got really aggressive, and whatever they were dealing with in there did not want them there. And that was not Sarah, and it was really unsettling for me. And to this day I don't really know how to explain it, but I thought it was really creepy. So for those of you who don't know, I actually grew up in a haunted house in Florida, and this was actually a newly built home that my parents had built on some land they bought in a neighborhood. And what's really crazy about all this is that my parents didn't really believe in ghosts before all of this. So moving into this home, they were really excited. This was a new beginning for them. This was a new beginning for all of us. And during this time, I was about 8 years old, and my sister was about 5 years old. So a lot of these stories were actually told to me by my parents. And what's really crazy about all of this is that my parents both were dealing with things, and they were not talking about it with each other because they both felt like they were crazy. So this all actually begins on the living room couch. So my dad and my mom and sister were sitting on the couch in the living room. They had an L-shaped couch, so my mom and sister were at the end here, and my dad was on this end here. They're watching a movie, and my dad is just sitting here like this, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees a little face looking at him. And he thought it was my sister, trying to scare him. So he jumps around the corner to scare my sister, and there's nobody there. And he looks over, and my mom and sister are still at the end of the couch, looking at him like he's crazy. And they're like, "What are you doing?" Or my mom was like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, I thought Layla was looking at me. Like, that's weird." And that was it. He didn't really think too much into it, and that was all there. But that was just the beginning. So as a kid, I had a really hard time sleeping, and I was always having nightmares. And looking back now, I'm not really sure if they were nightmares because it was the same nightmare pretty much every night. And I could not sleep. I had to sleep with my door open. I had to sleep with the light on in the hallway. And most of the time I would run in the middle of the night to go sleep in my parents' room. So hearing about this later on in my life really scared me because it kind of validated a lot that I was going through as a kid. In this reoccurring dream, there was a tall male figure standing behind my door in the dark and watching me as I slept very frequently. And there was nothing there, which is really creepy. So my dad would come and run to my bedroom when I was crying. And one of these nights when he ran to my bedroom, something ran past him and knocked him off of his feet. And he was in like a state of delusion because it's probably 1 or 2 in the morning. And my dad just keeps going to my bedroom, and he goes in there, sleeps in the bedroom with me until I fell asleep, and that was that. So after all of that, my mom actually went on a cruise. My dad still had not told my mom about any of that was going on. So my dad was actually really scared to sleep just with me and my sister at the house. So I went and slept in my dad's room with him, and this is where things get really creepy. Like I said, my mom was on a cruise. She was out of town. My dad is going to bed, slowly falling asleep. I was dead asleep. And my dad hears shuffling towards him on the carpet. That's how he describes the sound coming towards him. And he immediately goes into that state of fear. And out of nowhere, on his comforter, it just compresses down on his chest as if somebody sits on top of him. And he said it was the heaviest, most unsettling feeling he had ever felt. And he just started also praying. And he started saying the Lord's Prayer, I believe. And it actually went away. And he ended up going to bed, and my mom gets back. So he doesn't tell my mom this. So my mom is actually sleeping in my bedroom because she could not sleep with me and my dad in the same bed because I was probably a messy sleeper or whatever. Like I said, I was 8 years old. So my mom is sleeping in my bedroom so she could catch up on some sleep. So guess what my mom hears in the bedroom? Coming towards her, and she feels that unsettling, cold feeling, and then something lays right behind her, and she feels this heavy presence on her back, and then her hair gets flipped from underneath her pillow, and she stands up and runs back to her bedroom, jumps in bed, goes to bed, and then this is where they start talking about everything. The next day, my mom goes up to my dad. She said, "Hey, I've been having some problems, and I think there's something going on." And my dad goes, "Oh my gosh, I've been having problems too." As they're telling this story, so my mom is me, and my dad is you. And behind my mom is actually their bedroom doorway in the hallway, like deep back in the hallway, and their door is open, and it's dark in the bedroom. There's no lights on. And they're talking to each other about these stories, and my dad is talking to my mom, and he just looks right through my mom, right past her, through that doorway in the back. And my mom says, Adam, what's going on? What are you seeing? And he goes, nothing. And you know what my dad was seeing? There was a tall figure, male figure, standing in their bedroom in the dark. And ew, that just gave me chills. The next day, my dad immediately calls the person who sold them the property. And he calls them asking, what did we build this house on? Like, what was this land? And the person who sold them the land says, oh, it was an old graveyard. And my dad is like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. And then they said, no, I'm just kidding, it's not. But what it was an old hunting ground, which is really crazy. So my dad has this whole theory that he thinks it is a hunter and his dog. And the thing that was walking towards him on the carpet, making this noise, was the dog. And then the dog laying down on my dad's chest, compressing his chest, was like the spirit of a dog in the hunter who would lay next to my mom in bed, and was potentially the man standing behind my doorway, which is really, really creepy. So after coming to a conclusion with everything that this house is for sure haunted, my dad actually calls the church and has the priest come through and bless their house in each room and say a prayer over each room. And after that, they actually never really had any problems again in that home. And this is really crazy though. When they went to sell the house, they took photos of every bedroom. And when they took photos of my bedroom, there were oil-stained footprints walking towards my bed. And when you look at the carpet, there's nothing. They had them professionally cleaned, but it only showed up on photos, which is really weird. It's something unexplainable that they still talk about to this day. But with all that said, that's basically it from what I know about the story. And yeah, I mean, definitely startled me as a kid.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely...
Okay, I got one for you, and this one sounds not even bizarre. It just sounds like I'm crazy. So if anybody has answers as to what the fuck I seen, let me know in the comments. So we would stay at my great-grandmother's house. That was huge property, by the way, like huge. And it was a family reunion. We were the first ones to get there that night. And in the room that we stayed in was a huge, huge room. It was able to fit 3 beds, 3 queen beds, and a wardrobe in the corner, and like our suitcases. It was a really big room. In that big room is a door that has like, if you've been to Mexico, you know what I'm talking about. It's like the windows that are blurry that are usually found in like shower doors. So like you could see like figures on the other side. It's just that it's like not clear. So this door had that window, and that door lets you use like a smaller room. So I slept on a bed with my younger sister. Keep in mind, I'm 3. So my sister has to be like 1.5, maybe 2. Which is the furthest one away from the door. It's like the very corner. Next to us is another queen bed, and that's my parents. And then across from us is another bed on the corner by that door, and it's my older sister. She's sleeping by herself on that bed. Now, this is where it gets a little crazy, so stick. I woke up in the middle of the night to tapping sounds. I remember sitting up in my bed and looking around the room like, what is that? And everybody was sleeping. My dad snoring. Like, everybody's knocked out. All the lights are off. The only light that is in the room is the moonlight. There is a window in that big room, and it's like, I remember it being so high, and the moonlight is casting in. Now, on the other side of that little small room is also a window on the same side of the wall, and you can see the moonlight also casting in that other side of the room because it's bright in there. So I remember looking into that door, that at least a little small room, right? I saw this hairy dog-shaped man. Now, remember, it wasn't clear. I only saw like the outline of his face, and I remember his face looked like a Yorkie. Like, it was a big snout, and like I could see the hair. But one thing I will never forget is its long fingers and nails. I swear to God, it was like a horror movie. Like he was making the tapping sounds and I could see how long his fucking nails are. And I remember him pointing at me. So he'd do this and then point at me and then he would do this for me to come and open the door for him. Now, that sounds bizarre, but I remember I could see him visibly getting upset because I wasn't going to open the door. And I remember shaking my head and being like, no, I'm not going. I felt so scared, like something, I don't know what it was. It just, something was telling me, don't go open that. And I see him start getting frustrated and walking back and forth. So he would like walk that way, past the window, walk that way, past the, so start pacing around. And then he'd stop at the door again, at that little window, and start tapping again. And would just continue to point and have point down so for me to open the door. I remember that my parents said that I woke them up. I was screaming. That I kept saying that there was a dog man. There's a dog man outside the window. My dad thought it was a man, like trying to lure me outside. And so he hopped on the roof that is like right by that window where my sister's at. And no one could see, no one's seen anything. So my mom had to calm me down. She said that she went back to bed. She put me back to bed. But I remember like the lights going on and he wasn't there anymore. As soon as the lights go off, everybody falls back to sleep. He starts tapping again and he's there again. I remember I was so petrified that I slept with the covers over my head and I woke up the next morning. And apparently, I wasn't the only family member who has seen this dog man on the property. 2 other people that I know in my family, like distant relatives, have also seen what this creature was, and they actually seen it, like its face. To this day, I don't know what the fuck it was. I don't know if it's like, it just felt, whatever it was, it felt ancient. I don't know what it was. But if I close my eyes, I can put myself back there and I remember vividly what he was doing, how he was pacing, how he looked, those nails, the fingers, it was something like fucking Pennywise would do. I have not stayed in that property in like 20 plus years, but yeah, if anybody knows what it was, what it possibly may be, let me know.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
So before I tell the story, just know I was young. I was young and I was dumb, and I also was trying to fit in, okay? So, freshman year of college, just moved, first like 2 weeks in the dorm, just moved in. I met this guy I really liked, and he had already had like a really large group of friends at the college. So one night he texts me, he's like, hey, me and a bunch of like people, we're gonna go hang out and, you know, smoke and drink and stuff. Do you want to come? And, you know, I really liked him. So I was like, oh my gosh, yes, of course I'm gonna come. So we roll out, it's like 3 or 4 cars, there's like 12 of us. We're rolling in deep, right? And I'm like, okay, where are we going? He's like, oh, I'm gonna take you to this spot. You know, we've been coming here the last couple of days and everything. It's a really cool spot to hang out because of course you can't do that stuff in the dorm room. So me, I'm just like happy to ride. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've made friends already. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. And context, it's like 11 o'clock at night. It's super, super dark and it's cloudy. So we're riding out. We leave the college, we're riding out for a while. Like we're going way out there. And I'm like, where are we going? So finally we come to like this really long road. And there's nothing but like woods surrounding us. It's just one singular road in woods. It's like pitch black. We're riding down this road and we come to this like clearing. And there's one street light. And I'm like, where are we? And so I'm like pulling into the spot, following other cars. And as our headlight like shines on this clearing, I see that it's a graveyard. And I'm trying to be cool about it. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm being too superstitious. Like I'm not trying to, you know, seem stuck up to these new friends I'm trying to make, you know, first year college, trying to like get in where I fit in. So by the time we get there, there's already a couple of cars there. There's already people hanging out. And the people who rode with us, like in the back seat, they get out. And then the guy that I liked, he's riding up front with me. He gets out. And then I open my door. The moment I open my door, there is this huge gust of cold wind. Mind you, it's August in South Alabama. It's hot. There's this huge gust of cold wind. And then the whole forest surrounding us, the woods, gets completely silent. We're in the South. Okay, there are so many bugs and animals and critters that like are chittering and making noises at night. They just stop. It gets like eerily quiet, and the people who are already there, they like stop for a second and they're just like looking around. Everyone like just like pauses, because when you're used to hearing like all that ambient noise and then it just completely goes away, it's startling. So I got the door open. I got one foot in the car still, one foot out of the car. And the guy like is like, come on, let's go. I'm just like, okay. So I get out of the car and I'm out there for like 5 minutes and I'm feeling uneasy, but I'm trying to like push it down. But because I'm feeling uneasy, I'm not participating in like the drinking and smoking. So everything's good. Everyone's like laughing and dancing, and they're playing like music from a speaker, and they're all drinking and smoking and stuff. And I'm getting to know like new people. So the speaker that they're playing music on, it just dies. And then we hear like a really weird, like loud noise coming from the woods. We hear a really weird noise. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but right after that noise, we hear what sounds like chains. It sounds like someone's like jangling chains, and it's echoing through the whole woods. We're surrounded by the woods. Like there's woods all around us, and then there's just a street that we came on. So you can hear it echoing around us, like the chains are like surrounding us. I'm like, nope. I get in my car and I sit in my car. I stay in my car while they're out there doing stuff. They stay out there for like an hour. I'm in my car strolling on my phone. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Snapchat, and suddenly I just hear screaming, and everybody runs to their cars. Everybody runs to their car. They get in my car, like, go. I'm like trying to get my keys. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I'm like, what's happening? They're like, just drive. So we're driving. And as we're driving, I'm like, what's going on? What happened? And they were like, we heard people. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yes, we heard people. And then it sounded like people just running towards us, like just people running to us. We could hear them. So that happens, right? A couple weeks pass. Everything's fine. And then things weren't fine. Things started going like weird in my dorm room. And at the time, I didn't know this, but weird stuff wasn't just happening to me. It was happening to all my roommates. So in my dorm room, it was 4 of us. Okay, me and my best friend, we shared a dorm room. And then there were 2 other girls. One girl, it was a black girl. She was super spiritual. And the other girl, she was white. And she was like very hardcore Christian. So weird stuff was happening to all of us, but we weren't communicating it with each other. One of the weird things that happened to me and my boyfriend, we were sleeping in the living room because whenever he was my boyfriend at this time now. So we're in the living room sleeping, and I have a really bad dream. I like sit up because I'm about to get a sip of water, and I look over to the corner and I see like this shadow, like this dark shadow just like glooming towards us. Like, I don't know how to describe where a head would be. It was like turned like that to us, and we're sleeping like on the floor on like sleeping bags. So I scream, and my boyfriend wakes up, and he's like, what's going on? And I was like, I saw something. And he looks at me, and he was just like, what did you see? And I tell him. And so we stay up and we like watch like funny movies to try to lift the mood. And then, the next day he tells me, I didn't want to freak you out even more, but like I had a nightmare. Like right when you screamed, I was having like a terrible nightmare. And he was like, I actually been having like nightmares every night I stay in your dorm room. And then he was like, I think I'm gonna sleep in my own dorm room for a while. So like he didn't sleep in my dorm room for like a couple of weeks after that happened. So things were happening. My best friend, she would be in the dorm room when I went to class, and she'd be the only one in there because she had a different schedule than the rest of us. And she said that the door, and our doors were heavy. These are really heavy doors. She said she would have the door closed and it would just swing open and then close again. Swing open, close again randomly. She got so scared that she ended up going to she would go to the cafe when no one else was in the dorm room because she was so scared to be by herself in the dorm room. We had stuff on our walls. It wouldn't fall. It would be like thrown across the room. How does something hanging up on a wall, like our lights, like our little Christmas lights, it wouldn't just fall, thrown across the room. Lights would flicker. Cabinets would open. And one day, me and my best friend, we were like sitting there eating, and we were talking about it, and the spiritual girl and her boyfriend, they walk in, they hear us talking about it, and they're like, weird stuff has been happening to you guys too? We're like, yeah. And they tell us the stuff that's been happening. And then her boyfriend was like, yeah, one night we were out in the living room and she was asleep, and I look over and I see like this dark shadow, and I'm just like, I saw the exact same thing. So he gets oil, he starts anointing and praying over it. He's like, yeah, we got to get whatever's in here out of here. So he's praying, he's pulling out the works, okay? He's blessing every room, he's putting crosses over every door. And while he's doing this, our other roommate walks in and she freaks out. She completely freaks out. She packs up all her stuff. I don't know why. I still don't know why to this day she went crazy. She packs up her stuff. She leaves. She never comes back. Never comes back. So it was good for a while. But then the spiritual girl, like her boyfriend stopped coming to the dorm room because he got a job. So he wasn't sleeping there. When he stopped coming, things started getting bad again. So fast forward, things are getting weird again. Stuff is starting to happen. Me and my friend, we put a Bible on the desk and we leave it open because we're like, that's how scared we are. We're sleeping and we just hear the Bible, boom, close. And we're like, oh, hell no. No. So we're in theater class and we're talking about this. And this girl hears us. She hears us from across the room. She walks over to us and she says, I did not want to scare you guys, but for the last month and a half, I have felt like this dark presence around you guys. And she was like, I can feel like this dark presence around y'all. And we were like, what? And she was like, I don't want to freak you guys out, but I can, I'm really spiritually tapped in. And she was like, can I come to your dorm room and see what's going on? And we're like, sure. So we tell all our friends what's going on. So our friends that were at the graveyard, they come too because they want to see what's going on, because when they would come over and we would have game nights and stuff, weird stuff would happen as well. So we walk into the dorm room. She comes in last. As soon as she comes in the room, she steps over the threshold into the room, the lights flicker. And I'm not talking about no, I'm the lights are flickering, going crazy. And she's a white girl. She has really dark red hair. We can see the hair on her arms just stand up. We could see it. We could see the hair on the backs of her neck. She just got chills all over her entire body. And she was like, there's a spirit here. And she was like, this spirit is not happy that I'm in this room. So she's going through the entire dorm room, right? And she gets to my bed, my side of the dorm room, and the doors, both doors, our room door and our other roommate's room doors, open and close, open and close, open and close. At this point, everyone's screaming, freaking out. And she starts talking to the spirit and she's like, I know you're scared, but you need to calm down. You're okay, calm down. And then everything just stops and it just feels so calm. And she's talking to the spirit and we're just looking. We're looking. And she's like, okay, we need to get her back. And we're like, what? Get who back? And she was like, you need to take her back to her gravesite. And we were like, what? So we all get in the car, we take it back to the gravesite, and she finds this unmarked grave and she puts her spirit